Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to reconvene the 16th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. This public hearing will be broadcast on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I would like to welcome with us this morning the officials from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, and the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. My name is Dr. Nian Gadsby-Dolly, and I'm the chairman of the committee, this Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. And with me are several members of the committee, and I invite them now to introduce themselves to you, starting with our Vice Chairman.
Good morning all. Glenda Jennings-Smith, Vice Chairman.
Good morning. I'm Dineshwar Mahabir, Member, Independent Senator.
Dennis Moses, Member.
Good morning. Vidya Gaidin Gopi Singh, Member.
Now that we have introduced ourselves, I invite our officials here with us to introduce themselves, and maybe you can ask to start with the Ministry of Social Development, followed by the Office of the Prime Minister, and then followed by the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the TTPS.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to all. I'm Jacinta Bailey Sobers, one of the permanent secretaries in the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, and I will ask the other members of my team this morning to introduce themselves. Thanks.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Vidya Puran Singh, Director of National Family Services Division.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Vijay Gangaprasad, Chief Technical Officer, Acton.
Officials from the Office of the Prime Minister.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Jacqueline Johnson, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister.
Good morning, Chair. I am Antoinette Jack Martin, Acting Director of Gender.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Gayatri Paragas, Senior Legal Advisor, Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Owen Hender, Manager, Policy Research and Planning, Office of the Prime Minister.
Good morning, Chair and members. My name is Kwasi Kajo, Coordinator, Male Programs, Gender Affairs.
Good morning, Chair and member. My name is Patricia Hackett, Office of the Prime Minister, Gender Training Officer, Gender and Child Affairs.
Thank you so much. Can we now have the officials from the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the TTPS?
Good morning, Chair. I am Acting Deputy Commissioner of Police, Harold Phillip, Crime and Support.
Good morning, Chair. My name is David Dulalchad. I'm Acting Deputy Commissioner of Police in charge of operations.
Good morning, Chair and members. I'm Aisha Corby, Manager of the Victim and Witness Support Unit.
Good morning, Chair. I am Bernadette Lois Seeley, Victim and Witness Support Unit.
Thank you so much for all being here with us this morning. Domestic violence includes any form of abuse, whether mental, physical, verbal, financial, sexual, or psychological, committed by a person against a spouse, child, or any other member of the household. Data from the TTPS indicates 11,441 domestic violence reports between 2010 and 2015, 75% of them relating to female victims. That's over 8,500. Also in this period, there were 131 domestic violence-related deaths, 56% of which were female. As a committee, we are sure that it is these types of statistics which would have led this committee in its former iteration, the JSC on Human Rights, Diversity, the Environment, and Sustainable Development, to examine the programs and services which provide support to victims of domestic violence in the 5th session of the 10th Parliament. Out of the findings of this examination, 12 recommendations emerged. Since 2015, the available statistics do not show a marked decrease in domestic violence, with at least 14 deaths due to domestic violence up to 2017, and more than 1,500 reports lodged. And this is between 2015 and 2017. This has prompted this committee in its current iteration to examine the status of the implementation of the 12 recommendations mentioned before, with a view to identifying and suggesting possible solutions to any challenges in execution for at least some of them. So our objective this morning is to determine the status of the recommendations of the 2015 report of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Diversity, the Environment, and Sustainable Development on the examination of programs and services which provide support to victims of domestic violence. I would like to acknowledge and thank the different ministries and units for supplying the follow-up submissions that were asked for. And we got submissions from the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, from the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, and from the Victim and Witness Support Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. At this time, I would like to invite brief opening remarks from Mrs. Jacinta Bailey-Sobers, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, followed by Ms. Jacqueline Johnson, the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for Gender and Child Affairs, followed by Mr. Harold Phillip, the Deputy Commissioner of Police of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. Mrs. Sobers.
Thank you again, Chair. Once again, I'm happy to be a part of another session like this to provide information on a matter of national importance, domestic violence. The issue continues to be an especially worrying one for both policymakers and practitioners in the sector of Trinidad and Tobago. The data on its own speaks to the enormity of this social scourge, and I won't go into it because I'm sure we will hear much about it as we continue in this session this morning. Domestic violence, however, is symptomatic of much broader issues confronting the family, including economic, financial hardships, unemployment, substance abuse, mental issues, which, we have been dealing with a lot in the public these days, among others. It is therefore necessary to not only treat with the presenting problem of family violence, but also the underlying issues, and I think this is very important. The Family Services Division, and by extension, the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, therefore, has a key role in this regard, as the Vision 2030 National Development Strategy, as we may know, requires our ministry to protect and support the family as a fundamental institution of society. We are therefore of the view that a combination of behavior change and victim support initiatives would be necessary for us to treat effectively with this issue of domestic violence. This is particularly relevant in the context of our current economic situation, which has the potential to increase tensions within families. In this regard, the National Social Mitigation Plan, which was developed by the Ministry in collaboration with the Health Economic Unit of the University of the West Indies, to cushion the impact of the economic downturn on the population, and which was approved by Cabinet in August, is relevant and timely, and I thought it would be useful to bring this to the fore at this session. The plan includes a number of initiatives to support and strengthen the family, especially vulnerable families. And some of these include the introduction of a program to address values, attitudes, and behaviors of the population, which was held in great importance in the Vision 2030 document. The establishment of health and wellness centers in communities, enhancement and implementation of the Step Up, which is the social empowerment and transformation program, uplifting people, where we will focus on empowerment of vulnerable families and ensuring that that program is actually implemented in all the social programs in the sector, and the maintenance and acceleration of the plans and initiatives focusing on gender-related issues, and I'm sure Office of the Prime Minister will treat with those. The implementation of these initiatives, of course, together with the move to finalize the national parenting policy, which was laid in the Parliament this year, and the development of a national family policy, which will be undertaken in this fiscal year, will go a long way in strengthening the institution of the family and reducing the incidence of family violence. The ministry is presently working toward meeting with key stakeholders in the social sector to discuss the implementation plan for the rollout of the National Social Mitigation Plan over the next 5 years, and we look forward to collaboration with all agencies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Bailey-Sobers. Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, we're happy to be here. These discussions encourage us to look at what we have ratified in terms of the international conventions on the rights of the woman and our own Vision 2030 goal to achieve gender equality. At the Office of the Prime Minister, we continue to focus on those programs that would lead us toward the achievement of that goal of gender equality in 2030. Our specific programs continue to be focused on reducing domestic violence by building the awareness among our citizens of the scourge of this problem and its effects not only on family but on communities. And in fact, the entire cost of dealing with domestic violence from an economic perspective. We have started to treat with those strategic issues such as the legislation, the strategies to deal with domestic violence and gender-based violence as a whole. And we also have been trying to outfit the domestic violence unit so that we could specifically focus on the programming necessary to address domestic violence. So I hope that this discussion can lead us to some additional strategies that we can focus on in treating with this critical issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Phillip.
Good morning once again. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service welcomes this opportunity to assist the committee. In so doing, we continue to work with all our stakeholders. We also continue to build our capabilities and our competence within the police service and continue to engage in outreach programs to sensitize the different and various communities in their effort to stem the scourge of domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we will move now to the commencement of questioning. Let me just remind all members who are at the committee as well as the officials with us to direct your questions to the chair as we proceed along our questioning time. So let me start off the questioning, and I'll address this question to the Office of the Prime Minister officials. And you mentioned it in your opening statement with respect to the staffing at the unit. Now, if I look at the recommendations coming out of the 2015 examination, one of them that was directed towards the Ministry with Responsibility for Gender, Youth and Child Development, which is now the Office of the Prime Minister and that unit. There was an issue about the funding and the HR resources of the domestic violence unit. And the recommendation was that that would be a priority in the upcoming years. Looking at the submission which we received from you, we note that the position of manager domestic violence remains vacant at this time, and that there is an acting director of gender affairs as well, and that you were moving to fill those positions. And if I read the submission correctly, the full complement of the unit will be roughly 36 persons, of which 14 positions are filled right now, and that's if I'm reading it correctly. So on the basis of what I have before me and my interpretation of it, we seem to still have some critical vacancies, HR vacancies, and obviously that would impact upon the effectiveness and the efficiency of the unit. What and how soon, what is the status of recruitment for this unit, and how soon would that unit be filled, at least to the level where you can have a reasonable response in the way that you would want to, based on your plans?
The Office of the Prime Minister has made strides in terms of filling these positions in the Domestic Violence Unit and the Gender Affairs Division as a whole. We are currently seeking to have PMCD renew some of the positions that are now, which expired recently. And as I indicated in my submission, that note is before the Cabinet currently. So we're hoping by the end of this month, we will have Cabinet's approval, and we can proceed with the recruitment and selection of candidates for those positions. The other positions that we need to have created, those are currently before the Public Management Consulting Division for consideration. And we've had discussion with them, and we're hoping that we will have this finalized by the end of the year. These particular positions are specific to domestic violence, and that's the coordinator of the drop-in centers and the counselors for the gender support offices that we intend to create in South Central and hopefully North Trinidad. These centers would provide resources for victims of domestic violence and counseling services. The manager of the Domestic Violence Unit and the Director Gender, we've gotten the approval, as I indicated, from the Commission to proceed with our own recruitment for those two positions, guided by the regulations established for the devolved function by the Service Commissions Department. We have made promise to be up to speed in terms of our entire the establishment for the Gender Affairs Division, and by extension the unit, by the first quarter of 2018, subject to the availability of funds.
Thank you. And just to confirm, the two director positions which are being handled internally, those have been advertised for already? Because of the situation with the court matter, the Ministry of Energy, the Commission had initially advised that we hold our hands. In a correspondence recently, we got permission from the Commission to proceed with the advertisement of those two positions. Thank you so much. Senator Mahabir.
Thank you very much for being asked to come in first, Madam Chair. I have a question for Ms. Puran Singh, and the question is this. The issue of domestic violence is associated with the issue of safe houses. And I'd like to know how many safe houses are currently in operation in Trinidad and Tobago at this time. And from your experience, given the incidence of this problem, and it seems not to be abating, how many safe houses do we need? So how many do we have in operation, and how many do you think we need in order to address this problem at this time? Thank you.
Good morning again. At this time, I don't have an exact number of the actual operational safe houses. Office of the Prime Minister, Gender, may have that figure. In terms of having access to safe houses, it is a problem. There is a need for more, and not just the way they're operating now, because there are some circumstances where you need to place a female and children, and some of the safe centers are not capable of housing a family of maybe a female with 4 children, male and female, with even teenage children. They're not geared to handle those type of situations. So it is an issue, and I know previously the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child were looking at establishing a couple more of these safe houses where you can house families, but I suppose they would be able to say the status on that.
May I ask the Office of the Prime Minister to respond?
Certainly. We currently have 8 shelters, and these are all run by private individuals, non-government organizations. Our intention is to operationalize 4 shelters, 4 safe houses, shelters as we call them. 2 were newly constructed to accommodate families, women with children, and that capacity we indicated in our submission. We're looking at 52 persons, including children there. We also have 2 residential type 3-bedroom units, which the Ministry of Works is refurbishing for us to house victims as well. 1 for male, and we hope 1 for females. The 2 shelters that NIBDEC constructed for us has been significantly delayed because of the absence of the funding. So the contractors, when they were not getting their payment, they actually demobilized their construction activities at the site. We have been able to raise a loan, a government guaranteed loan, to make the payments, and the construction has now started back at the sites, and NIBDEC has indicated that we will get the handover of those properties, 1 in December 2017 and 1 by the end of January 2018. So those would be the 4 additional shelters that the government would operationalize in this fiscal.
If I may, one of the misconceptions, if I may call it that, is that domestic violence is a problem that affects only women. Now, if I understand you correctly, there should be 4 government safe houses to come on stream within this fiscal year. And one of those would be for men. The question I'm asking is, what is the incidence of male seeking shelter for domestic violence issues? And should we, if we have 4 that are going to come on stream, should we dedicate all of those to women? Because do we have more women who would need access to those shelters? Is it the best use of the shelter? And I'm sure there's more demand than we can supply. Is it the best use to dedicate it, one of them, exclusively for the male use?
Madam Chair, we know that 75% of our reports are related to women. And that is based on what we have gotten from CAPA, the police, as well as from our hotline. So that data, that is the data that we're using to determine that we would allocate 1 for men and the other 3 to women. With regard to specific numbers, Madam Chair, I can't say with any certainty what those numbers are looking like at the present time.
So if they do come on stream in the next fiscal, as we expect that they would, and there is not a great demand by males, what would be the thinking? Would it be that you would use the one that is dedicated to males maybe to house females with sons over 10? Because in the submissions I saw that there was an issue with boys over 10 being housed in the safe houses.
The 2 new facilities we constructed would house women with children, including boys. The 2 residential facilities that we're creating, we would not be able to house women there who have boys. And so those 2 units we're setting aside for men, and based on the demand, we may be able to convert it for the use of women based on the demand. But the other one, we have set aside that for a single family. The one with men, we are hoping to have a disabled unit at the bottom, on the bottom floor, and on the top floor would be dedicated specifically to 1 family. Those are residential 2- and 3-bedroom type units. The new units we have constructed are designed in such a way that you have an apartment type setting within the facility, which would accommodate a woman with a daughter and a son. So there's now accommodation for women who want to leave their homes with their children, which includes a male.
Mrs. Kyrene Gopison?
Yeah. I believe this question I'll focus to Mr. Harold Phillip. Mr. Phillip, when a woman calls for help, she's been physically abused, is there a recommended time of response from the police station to the woman's home of where she is being violated? And what is the time that the police ought to respond, and what is the time that it actually does that response in Trinidad? So the question is there a recommended time within which you must respond to that victim? And what is the time that is carried out, or it is at the police stations in Trinidad and Tobago, that response is made to that particular victim?
With respect to all reports, be it domestic violence and other general reports.
About domestic?
Yes. But we have not set a time, but we expect our requirements are that all reports should be attended to promptly, and we have been so doing to the best of our ability in terms of responding to reports of domestic violence. And we have been...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you all have any issue with respect to transport? And so now, I know it has always been a problem, no vehicles at the police station. Do you all still have issues with transport and so?
Well, generally, we do not have issues with respect to transport at this time in the police service.
Follow up, Madam Chair. You said the police responds promptly. What does promptly mean from policing? Does it mean in half hour, an hour, tomorrow? I don't know what promptly means with respect to policing in Trinidad and Tobago.
Well, when the report reaches the police or comes to the attention of the police, once we have vehicles outside, or if we need to utilize officers from the station, what we do, because of the very nature of those reports that are, in fact, could cause injury and harm, the police officers are required to be dispatched promptly to those, to attend to those reports.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
I just would like to know, is there an international standard you all are guided by with respect to time of response? Is there an international guideline?
No.
Mr. Jennings-Smith.
Yeah. Now, domestic violence, as we all know, do not happen overnight. We know it starts with a first issue or incident. I would like to know, what is the collaboration between the police and the social services department when a report is made? So I'm asking the Victim and Support Unit to tell us what is the relationship and the support mechanism in place to deal with that first report and the continuation and helping the person, the victim, to get out of that circle or that spider's web.
I would like to, the manager of the Victim and Witness Support Unit to assist, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Phillip. The Victim and Witness Support Unit, as you rightly said, ma'am, recognizes that domestic violence, it doesn't occur overnight with a victim. And there's a process by which this type of offense and trauma exists. So once a report comes to the Victim and Witness Support Unit via referral, be it from the police office, the police station, be it from a social support agency, be it a tragedy that we recognize in the media, the officers of the Victim and Witness Support Unit responds within, our standard is within 24 hours of getting that information. We seek to make contact with the victim. This contact is made once we get some telephone contact information. If the information is received via the media, we attempt to liaise with the related police station, access the investigator, and we contact the victim via phone, inviting them to come in, or if they are unable to come in, we attempt to develop a plan towards visiting the victim as necessary. Once we engage the victim, a detailed needs assessment is conducted with this victim to determine what is his or her present state, what are the needs that we can provide, and what agencies we can liaise with towards providing these needs. The initial focus is towards his or her safety. Is there a need for a safety plan, which we would develop same and encourage the clients to implement it? Once this is implemented, some clients may look towards applying for a protection order. We would give them detailed guidelines as to how the process works. If they decide to do so, we accompany them to court, because sometimes even the court space may be re-traumatizing for the domestic violence victim. So we assist them with that. And thereafter, the client may decide, because we leave it up to the client because of self-determination, for they to select what they decide to do. Some clients may decide to go to a shelter because of safety. In so doing, we will access the 800 SAVE, or some shelters that we liaise with in terms of networking for the client to be safe. As would have been mentioned previously, in our experience, we also have the challenge of domestic violence victims that are female and have male children beyond the age of 10. So that continues to be a challenge to us as well. However, in the instances where a shelter is not accessed or they are not willing to go to a shelter at that time they're encouraged to go to another safe place, be it a friend or a relative. And further to their accommodation being settled, then we look at the other needs that the client may possess. We liaise with a number of agencies that would sometimes offer entry-level positions to the client, because we recognize there is a financial component that may keep several persons in domestic violence situations. So we'd also liaise with agencies that will assist them with employment. We would advocate on behalf of our clients, and we constantly partner with the National Family Services Division relative to offering assistance to clients through assessing them for different grants that they may be eligible for with these other agencies, governmental agencies, be it public assistance, be it some other form of social welfare or support. So these are just some of the agencies that we would liaise with on behalf of our clients. Of course, we also have the Criminal Injuries Compensation Board that may assist given the type of offense that may occur and the compensation that the client may be entitled to based on their parameters.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we have, what I want to ask though, specifically, all of the measures that you have outlined, and there are many, and we would take it that there's a lot of support being offered. But I want to bring it back to what the inquiry is looking at with respect to how that has changed since 2015 based on recommendations that were made. And I heard you mentioning some of the things that would have come in here, because they asked specifically in the third recommendation about the creation of a coordinating body. And I looked at the submissions from each of the agencies, and what I did not see was that creation of any formal mechanism by which there is liaison between the three agencies that deal with domestic violence. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things, and in your explanation, you reference being able to be the intermediary for the domestic violence victim in different areas, in the courts and so on. And this, I imagine, would have been the idea behind this virtual one-stop support shop, I'm calling it that would allow a domestic violence victim to come into one place and be able to access the services that are available. So I understand that the victim and witness support unit may do this informally, where you have a natural nexus. Has there been, since 2015, any move by any of the agencies before us to bring together into one coordinating body that type of one-stop shop for domestic violence victims that would allow them to come in, you know, as they are broken, scattered, and to be able to be carried through all of the different permutations of assistance that can be given to them, so that their journey is easier and the support is easier to be able to be accessed? Is there anything like that happening? And this is an open question to any of the agencies before us.
Madam Chair, what you raised there is critical. We currently, the Office of the Prime Minister currently has a note before the Cabinet to address strengthening the coordination and the legislation relating to domestic violence and other forms of violence against women and children. And that note speaks to the creation of an interministerial committee to discuss the very issue that you're raising there. How do we coordinate the efforts in various agencies of government to ensure that a victim of domestic violence gets is accessing a one-stop to get all the services, shelters, financial services, counseling, all the things that we have detailed in the report, which looks at the review of the Domestic Violence Act and the necessary structure to be put in place to ensure that these people receive the services that they need in a very kind of holistic fashion. So that was submitted to the cabinet. It is with the Finance and General Purpose Committee for a decision to come shortly.
And if I just very quickly ask this, as a member of parliament, this interests me very much because from time to time, we get women coming with different issues. Some of them are domestic violence sufferers, victims, and some of them feel that they are threatened, and it may reach to that. So it hasn't gotten there yet, but it may reach to that. In both instances, what is the best advice? Who do I send the person who is actually a victim? Do I send them to the victim and witness support unit? And the person who is, who has the potential, they think, to become a victim, where do I send that person?
There are different levels of entry in terms of intervention for domestic violence. At National Family Services Division, we get referrals from the court, and in most instances, some incident would have already happened, and both parties are sent to us for counseling, for trying to arrive at a resolution. So at National Family Services, we don't just look or treat with the victim, we also treat with the alleged perpetrators. So what we try to do is try to assess what are the underlying factors that is leading to the conflict. And once we identify that, then we try to treat with each area in terms of counseling, in terms of referral to relevant agencies. And there are sometimes we may not be able to find a resolution. It might be best for placement. So it depends on each situation. There is no general fixed rule. We treat each situation for whatever is happening in that person's or persons' lives. So sometimes there are children involved, and if the children are at risk and need to be removed, we will network with either Children's Authority or we network with other relatives or friends who might be able to lend shelter for a short time until we continue to work with the families. If it's financial, we would refer to social welfare, or sometimes we network with non-governmental agencies also to fulfill the client's needs. So we don't just restrict to referrals within government service, but also outside. So in terms of, you were asking if you were to send the victim, the victim can come to family services, but we, as I said, we treat with the whole family. We don't just treat with the victim, because we want to find out what is the problem, what's causing the dysfunction in the family. And usually, if someone is engaging in violence, that means something is wrong, that the person needs help. So we try to see how we can help the perpetrator.
Okay. Senator Mahbub wants to follow up, and Senator Moses after him. The question is still open to the others if they want to address it while they are addressing the other questions, because they're following up from this.
Very much, Madam Chair. This is a direct follow-up from the comments of the Family Services Unit, and that is, you indicated that you treat with the whole family unit so that there is a victim and there is a perpetrator. The perpetrator may have his own issues. If there was no perpetrator, there'd be no victim, and that he may have alcohol, narcotics, substance abuse, unemployment, a range of issues. What I'd like to know is this: do you have a program in place of mandatory counseling for the perpetrator, such that once he has been accused of domestic violence, that he goes into this program so that he or she can see the errors of his ways? And I'd want to bring in the police here as well, because under the Summary Offences Act, it is illegal to be violent to another person. Under the Section 4 and 5, under Section 5, I think, of summary offenses, someone can be liable to 6 months imprisonment. Whether it's you related or not, being violent to another person is a criminal offense. I'm wondering from you, what is the counseling, and from the police, second, whether instead of indicating to the individual that we're going to press charges, do you refer the perpetrator to the family services for a program of counseling first so he can mend his ways or her ways?
We don't have by itself a mandatory program where the perpetrator has to be in counseling, but when the matter is referred by the court, that makes it mandatory. So if a family is referred a matter, I have to say a matter because it can be 2 persons, 3 persons, 4 persons. Once that matter is referred, then that makes it mandatory.
You see, it was indicated that it's a matter referred by the court. I'm wondering whether the police, and there was in the past a community police, wanting to keep the family intact, not wanting to, because the perpetrator may be the sole income earner in the family. Does the police take it upon itself, the soft touch of the police service, to have the perpetrator undertake a program of counseling so that at least he can mend his ways before he is subject to court processes?
Thanks. If when the report is made, a criminal offense has been established and the victim has in fact went to seek medical attention and we got a medical certificate, those 2 sections that you made mention of under the Summary Offences Act, which is Section 4 and 5, assault, aggravated assault, or assault by beating is the cases, generally, persons, once the victim is present, we would certainly pursue a criminal charge. In other instances, sometimes you find that the victim want the person to be warned, and it's in that light that the victim and witness support, you would find that other kinds of remedial actions are taken in relation to the perpetrator.
On this, and the last follow-up is, in my visit to the prison, I had the privilege, as a member of this committee, to visit the prison. I met some individuals who were in prison because they were unable to pay child support. I did not meet anyone who was in prison because he was violent to a family member. Would you say that there is a high incidence of the victims pressing the charges at the magistrates or the other courts to ensure that there is justice, or is it that many of these cases are dismissed somewhere along the line?
Well, in some instances, remember that fines, because there are summary fines are paid and so on. Some people they may even get, because it's a first offense, reprimanded and so on. So there are a number of sanctions that take place. So this is why you would find.
Basically, you depend on the courts then to refer the perpetrator to the counseling. You don't think it's a police matter?
No, this, we have said that if the victim, if when the report is made and the victim isn't present for the perpetrator to be prosecuted, in that light, we refer the person for counseling and so on.
Who offers that counseling? To whom do you refer?
I will have to refer the victim and witness support manager to speak about that.
Thank you, Mr. Phillip. Thank you, Madam Chair. In the most part, the Victim and Witness Support Unit services crime victims, but we have also been offering support to perpetrators or alleged perpetrators of domestic violence. In particular instances where the female does not want to pursue legal action and just require warning, and there may be children in the home, we would conduct an assessment and we would offer that similar support to some perpetrators of domestic violence. What remains, however, is at this point, it may not be mandatory, so the perpetrator may choose not to attend. So that is one of the issues that may occur in terms of him or her getting that type of support to mitigate the type of abusive behavior.
Sorry, Senator Moses wanted to.
Yeah, okay, after.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. The first one is a short one. What is the number of reported cases of domestic violence in Tobago in respect of last year and this year? That's the first one. And the second one relates to the procedure protocol employed by the unit, the victim and victim support unit, to address complaints by victims of domestic violence in respect of breaking protection orders by the abuser.
Thank you very much.
In terms of the number of reports of domestic violence in Tobago in 2016, we would have had 18 reports, and to date, we would have had 8 reports of domestic violence reported to the police in Tobago today. The second question. Okay, baby.
Unit to address complaints by victims of domestic violence relative to breaking protection orders by the abuser.
Thank you very much. Relative to clients that may report that there have been breaches in the protection order, we would usually direct the client to the police because of the breach that would have occurred. There would be legal ramifications towards the breaching of a protection order. So in so doing, we would engage the police officers at the nearest police station as soon as is possible and encourage the victim to report that incident and have the matter pursued through the police at the related station. Right? However, if there are other supports needed to the victim in addition to the legal aspect, well, that is where we would offer that type of assistance to them. Right?
Mrs. Johnson.
I want to take us back to the remit of this committee meeting today, which really speaks to the programs and services provided to victims of domestic violence. And I'm happy to hear social services, family services, when you brought up the point about the perpetrators, that you deal with families. But I also heard another submission which admitted that perpetrators sometimes do not attend. And I want to go back to my first question when I asked you about the programs. Now, I think we need to be more open, because certainly there is a cutoff point between the services of the victim support unit and the services which are offered by the family services. And there needs to be a coordination. I saw also where in the last recommendation, Cabinet had agreed to the creation of an interagency committee to oversee the establishment of a central registry, all those sort of things. And I want to know what type of coordination we have, because a victim of domestic violence can be a victim from 1 to 20 years or the entire lifetime. And therefore, that's why the programs and the services which are provided to these victims are so critical. What coordinates the both bodies? Family services, social agencies, what coordinates you all to really hold on to the perpetrators as well as the victims, and more so the perpetrators, because they could be termed repeat offenders, because it's a cycle of violence. How strong is that body, that body between the relationship between the both parties, the police and the agencies, in keeping abreast with these perpetrators as well as the victim? Because then too you have a victim dependent on financial support. And that's why a victim would usually go back to the perpetrator, because they depend on that financial support. So any kind of relationship to combat that, it has to be strong and robust. Tell me, family services, tell me something. The police has said that the perpetrators sometimes do not attend. Tell me, what do you do when that happens? Or do they inform you that things are not going as planned? Because the court matter itself can take a long time to be completed.
There's a lot of issues there. Unfortunately, we don't have the authority to mandate a perpetrator to attend counseling or to be privy to whatever intervention that we would apply. So we do depend, we do network. Networking is our key, if you want to put code, it's what we use to keep the intervention ongoing. So for instance, if we're talking about a breach of a protection order, then we network with the police and we network with, if there are other agencies involved, we would network with those agencies. If there are issues in terms of finance, we network again. It's a lot of it. The networking has to be that the cement that keeps the whole process together. So if there's financial issues, we network with the relevant agencies that would lend that type of assistance. Sometimes we think outside the box. Sometimes the person may not qualify for, let's say, a social welfare grant. So then we have to go outside the box and think of maybe an NGO that may be able to help. So it's not always restricted to the services that are provided within the ministries. In terms of, we rely heavily on the court again. So if we're treating with a case, a matter, and we see that there's a potential for a breach, we would indicate via writing to the magistrate to inform our observation, and we will make recommendations. In terms of, I know you were weighing your question heavily on the finance, which tends to keep the victim in the perpetrator's control. So once we recognize that, we offer options. But as victim and witness support would have said, it all depends on the person. The person makes the decision. We cannot force. We have been discussing, the key agencies have been having discussions. We've had discussions, and we're looking at, whilst we understand what each other's roles are, every agency has their remit, and they would work with the clients until a certain point. Let me give an example. If victim and witness support has intervened initially with a matter, and they've gone through the court processes, and the persons have, a person has received a protection order, but there's need for parenting, there is need for other types of issues to be addressed, they would refer to family services, and then we would do the long-term follow-up. So it's not that the matter is just finished after protection order is granted or not. There would be other issues that would have to be addressed, and that's where we continue to work. That's where we engage in case management. And in case management, you don't have a cutoff point. You work with the family, you work with the individuals until they reach a higher level of social functioning.
If I may draw your attention to two of the recommendations that were made in 2015, and they deal with public awareness and education, right? And looking at the submission from the family services,
yes,
there is a program that is run on the radio. It's called It's Family Time, Let's Talk. And that program does deal with the topic of domestic violence, right, at times. Deals with parenting and so on, and different issues, but domestic violence is raised there. My question is, what is the target audience of this program? And based on that, what is the time, is that target audience matched with the station that the program is run on and the time it is run? And are there young women being targeted, girls and boys being targeted for this program? And does that, where it's run then, does that reach that particular audience? Is that audience the target? And if that is not the target, then what is being done by family services as well as the other agencies to sensitize the youth about this problem that we have in Trinidad and Tobago?
In terms of the radio program, it's Family Time, Let's Talk. What we do is, well, first of all, our target is the national community. It's not just one category, it's the whole national community. When we are looking to air the program, what we do is we do a comparison and we try to get a radio station that has a wide listenership as possible. We also look at the time slots that would be available by the station and what we think might be a feasible time to catch certain, well, not just housewives, but other persons. So the intent is not to capture just a small percentage of persons, but the wider community. Because if you want to stem domestic violence, it cannot be one group of people who are sensitized. It has to be everybody.
All right, so what station does it run on and what time does it run?
The last program we held, it was on I-95.5 FM, and it was between the hour of 10 to 11. Half hour of that hour would have been open to the public to call in.
So do you agree with me then that if you're offering it between 10 and 11, then you've already, the whole school population and a lot of the working population who can't listen to a radio at this time of the day would not be privy to the program. So what other measures then? So this target audience would really be maybe your homemakers, those who are at home at this time, or the few people who are working in a situation where they would listen to a radio at that time, or those who are on the road. So this will not target young people at all. What other devices have you been able to come up with, any of the agencies, that would target young people and would bring these types of messages, which are critical for young people to hear, young girls who are entering into relationships and need to look at the signs of what could be a domestic abuser, or boys, because we are recognizing this. What is being done to, one, sensitize young men that they can be victims of domestic abuse, sensitize young women that they're also at a higher risk than boys of getting into domestic abuse type relationships, and how they can access help, how they can look for the signs, what is being done with public awareness for our young people coming up, getting into relationships. And this is the open question to all of the agencies that deal with this.
If I may, it is a challenge in terms of the times because you have children attending school, and my suggestion would be that you have programs in the school, at least you get that one population, so you have that under the social studies, the curriculum has to be readjusted in order to introduce that type of sensitization. And I do agree that the young men have to be sensitized on what is domestic violence and how to prevent it. So whilst it might be a challenge to capture with one program all the different age groups, you would have to look at different channels, different avenues, and I respectfully suggest that the school population would be one avenue. And I suppose you have student support services that can take up that level of responsibility. In terms of the networking still happens, because if there are seminars or lectures in the school, we are invited to come in and give information on domestic violence. So there are different channels, but in terms of if you're looking at the young persons, we have to start somewhere, and I respectfully suggest that you start at the schools and readjusting or revisiting the curriculum.
If I may.
Before you follow up, could I ask any of the other agencies to respond on this? I'm seeing someone from the Office of the Prime Minister, and then we'll take the Victim and Witness Support Unit.
If I may, Madam Chair, what the Office of the Prime Minister Gender and Child Affairs does with respect to bringing awareness to the population about gender-based violence and domestic violence, we conduct a number of outreaches and a number of community fairs. As of today, tomorrow we celebrate international the elimination of violence against women, and we have a community fair at City Gate where we share information and public information about domestic violence. What we also do, we also receive requests from agencies asking us to come in to conduct training on domestic violence. We've just recently conducted one at the Defense Force, where we had about 75 persons in attendance. We also received requests from Serval and YTEP and other agencies. So that's one way of that the Office of the Prime Minister responds to that outreaches and community fairs.
Thank you. The official from Victim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. From the Victim and Witness Support Unit standpoint, we would offer to both children as well as adults in terms of targeting children and sensitizing them with the effects and the impact of domestic violence. We would have conducted a number of workshops at several primary schools as well as tertiary institutions. So towards the whole idea of domestic violence, what it is, how do I know if I am a victim, and where do I get assistance? We would have also done with community groups, a number of community groups we would hold workshops with, and we liaise, of course, very directly with the police youth clubs. And we'll do presentations at the police youth clubs towards where we have a large catchment of young persons attending those clubs, and sometimes their parents, so as to share that information about domestic violence. In terms of outreaches and fairs, through the TTPS, they would also host outreaches, and we would have a booth there, Victim Support, as one of the branches or the units of the organization, sharing about domestic violence with members of the public, as well as outreaches of other agencies, as our colleagues at OPM Victim Support is partnering with them as well and has a booth there as we speak, sharing information on domestic violence issues. And when we look at persons that may be adults, we also have support groups. And these support groups are both we have children support groups for persons that are children, as well as for adults to treat with matters of violence on the whole. And some of them would tune in directly to domestic violence. Recently, we would have hosted a Confronting Fair one-day workshop where we would have shared with a number of stakeholders as well as victims on how do we deal with the fear of crime in terms of violence, and we would have looked at domestic violence. How do you identify if you're a victim? Where do you get help? What is normal? What may not be normal? And we had a whole catchment of social agencies there sharing of their services with members of the public. So those are some of the things that the Victim and Witness Support Unit would do on an ongoing basis to sensitize the citizenry.
Mr. Philip, did you want to weigh in?
I just wanted to add to that, our community police officers, they work closely with the communities and including the Victim and Witness Support Unit. So they do outreach programs within the community, also along the lines of sensitizing the community with respect to domestic violence. So the community police officers, they go to schools, they go within the communities, and they do the same thing too.
Can I ask, just as a follow-up to this, does anyone do any type of robust social media intervention? What information is available on social media to reach that population who may not come out to any of the outreaches, who may not be involved in the police youth club, who may not come out to different agency presentations? Is there any social media presence at all and that gives someone all the information that they would want to get and gives them an indication of where they can find assistance and that type of support?
At the Office of the Prime Minister, Gender and Child Affairs, on our Facebook page, we share all information that pertains to domestic violence, our men's program, and all the activities that the Gender Affairs Division undertakes. It's on our Facebook page.
Madam Chair, if I may just add, what is required here is really a look and analysis of the data that we have available so that we can carefully segment the groups so that we can bring the programming closer to those areas in our country where we have the prevalence of a higher prevalence of domestic violence. And I think that is what the information, that's what we want to do at the Office of the Prime Minister, given the new data that we've been having since 2015. And those positions which we have recently filled in terms of in September there, our gender training officer and our male male programming officer is intended to look at that kind of segmentation to design the programming necessary to achieve that, that purpose.
Thank you. Mrs. Guiding Officer.
Thank you. I'm listening to the Victim and Witness Support Unit, and respectfully, it comes across very flowery and academic here. My question is, the number of measures you have to put in place to deal with these victims, and we have so many agencies here. Are any of these agencies outfitted with the resources to effectively deal with the victims in this country?
Madam Chair, if I may, talking on behalf of Family Services Division, that we are on a drive to actually staff the division. We recognize the importance of the division with respect to the family and ensuring that those values, attitudes, and behaviors, and as I indicated, that was an important program that we will be moving towards implementing in fiscal 2018, which I believe will assist in helping families to deal with the issues that present so that it doesn't reach to the stage of domestic violence. But that unit, we are moving towards staffing, giving that the staffing that is required in that division. So on the Ministry of Social Development's side, that's what we are working on feverishly in the ministry for that particular division.
In the meanwhile, what happens to the victims? Whilst all this thing is happening, do you refer them to other agencies whilst this is being outfitted?
I'll ask Ms. Puransing to speak, but the unit continues with the resources that they have, and I think they complement the staff by networking with the other agencies, including Office of the Prime Minister and Victim Support Unit, Victim and Witness Support. But I also wanted to indicate that a critical aspect of what we have to do with the coordination has to do with the protocols that have to be established between the agencies so that persons don't fall through the cracks. And that's an area that Family Services has been working on. And I believe with the coordination, that note that went to Cabinet, that may have spoken to that very important area also. But Ms. Puransing would speak to that other area.
Whilst we know that there is a shortage of staff and there's a need to build capacity, it doesn't mean that the work stops. And we do continue, we do remedial, and we do preventative. And through the preventative means we have the radio program where we're disseminating information, plus we have the training, the community training workshops that we call lay responders to domestic violence. So that is one way, while we're dealing with the remedial through the case management at our 11 locations, because we are located in 11 areas. So we are still there, we are still present, even though we may have some challenges. We are still offering the service. We don't turn anybody away. And we're still trying, as I said, through the preventative means in terms of the media messaging, in terms of, we do have a Facebook page, the ministry has a Facebook page where information is also provided. And we do the training workshops while we also continue with case management at the regional levels.
Right. At the end of the case management, is there any follow-up process with respect to the victims to see the end result?
Well, as I said before, there's no cutoff point. You have to be satisfied that you have reached the persons, and I'm saying persons because it's not just the victim, it's the family, it's the couple, it's whomever you're treating with. So you don't just, just do a few sessions and leave it there. You have to be satisfied that the persons have reached from a lower level of functioning to a higher level of functioning. So literally, you don't close off a case until you're satisfied that they're able now that they have been rehabilitated to some point where they can now live a stable life.
Okay, let's take a question from Mr. Jennings.
Now, I've listened to some of the submissions there, and quite clearly what comes out is that the need for us to track perpetrators, keep abreast with victims. I've heard you talk about limited resources, shortage of staff, And we are looking at targeting, giving responses more targeted, cost-effective. And it brings me back to the whole point of this central registry, which was completed and launched in 2016. And I am quoting here from the answers given by the Office of the Prime Minister. I want to ask you, since then to now, what is the number of agencies which contributed to the registry? That's just one question. Are the agencies being trained or have been trained to effectively use the registry to capture data? And is the central registry on domestic violence effective when it comes to capturing data? And last but not least, how is the central registry being used to interconnect safe and civil society organizations to reduce duplication? And are you able to deal with the gaps that the services of this different department offers?
So I think what is being asked is a brief on this registry. How is it working? You know, what is happening there? Who is trained to use it? Who is accessing it? That kind of brief.
Who has so far contributed to this registry?
Madam Chair?
Central Registry on Domestic Violence.
Yes, the Central Registry on Domestic Violence is an information system which collects and integrates information relating to any person who is a victim or perpetrator of domestic violence offenses. So far, the registry has 8 shelters and 1 counseling center. We also have the information from CAPA. We also have information coming in from National Family Services. We are in the process of collecting information from the health, from our Ministry of Health, agencies that gets data on domestic violence.
Who uses the central registry? What exactly is the purpose of it? Why was it established? And what were the objectives of it? And is it meeting any of the objectives which it started off with?
Okay, the objectives is to provide efficient and effective method of monitoring domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago. It's also enables early identification of needs, timely responses, and effective holistic intervention strategies. So when we collect this data, we hope at the end of the collection of the data to design programs that would meet the needs of the persons that are being abused.
Can you say how many persons that you have made a difference and how many families' life you have impacted in so far since you have had that agency, that registry ongoing? Because I'm looking at when you capture data, how real-time it is, and when you are really able to make effect. And tell us now, because we're talking about data, tell us how many persons you have impacted upon and the success.
Because it is an information system, we have not yet reached the stage where we are providing interventions. It's actually data collection in order to inform policy and programs.
Could I just ask, the data you're collecting, is it on offenders, victims? What type of data goes into the registry?
It's the data on the victims themselves as well as the perpetrator. The data that is collected is the demographics of the client, the family members of the client, the detailed case notes of the clients, referrals, and enrollments. It hasn't reached a stage of coming up with interventions as yet.
So are you saying that you are just collecting information, you are not analyzing the information, you are not collating to make responses or to give guidance to the different agencies for better response action?
Madam Chair, the registry is in its early stages of development. What we have now is about 12 agencies contributing to that data. Earlier, we said that we need to now, we have started the analysis program process that would lead us to segmenting the various categories that we need to deal with to promote awareness and to deliver services. One of the things we have already seen with the data coming out is the prevalence of domestic violence in certain areas. So we know now that we have some resources on board. We are focusing on designing programming for certain groups and certain areas. That's the purpose of the registry. So the data, some of it is real time. For example, the ones coming in directly from the shelter, we have trained those persons to use the system, and we do continuous training in that regard because the people at the shelters are they change very often. We also have CAPA bringing in their data on domestic violence into the registry, and we also have like Rape Crisis and those NGOs that focus on domestic violence contributing to the information. Once the information is collected, what we do is analyze the information to advise on policy and programs.
And
So
how soon do you expect that to happen?
That process is ongoing.
No, you just said that you have not reached that point of analyzing, making analysis, and...
No, we haven't reached the point of doing programs, but it certainly has influenced the decisions we made with the gender policy, with the domestic violence strategy. So it's influencing policies already. The programming part, it has not begun to influence that areas yet. And the delivery of service. We know, for example, from the data we have collected, that we need to put counselors and create gender resource centers to provide services for victims who believe they may be a victim or a perpetrator. We also know that we need to provide services for victims, and we know we need to set them up initially in certain areas. However, that whole programming part, for example, to provide counseling, is still in the making. I indicated in my submission that we want to create the gender resource centers in 2 areas in Trinidad, and that notice before the PMCD, so that we can get the positions created to employ counselors to provide the services and information for victims of domestic violence.
Senator Mahabir.
Madam Chair, this is a follow-up. It's not a substantive. I have another substantive, which I will raise subsequently. But the follow-up is an issue raised by Ms. Puran Singh of Family Services. And the submission was that the school population is currently not exposed in any meaningful way to the information you offer in the radio program and with the expertise you have. And I'm simply wondering whether you have had any contact with the Ministry of Education so that they can add in their curriculum somewhere, social studies somewhere, a module on domestic violence. And I raise this in the context of what I see in mainstream media. There is a program with sexual abuse, and children are speaking about it. And I thought it was a very valuable message where children are telling other children about the issue of sexual abuse. Now we are dealing with victims of domestic abuse, many of whom are children who are traumatized, although they would not have been the victims themselves of physical violence, but simply witnessing it. And I'm wondering whether you have the resources to prepare a module that you, with online resources, the UN I know has a lot of things on this, so that you could submit to the Ministry of Education for consideration? Or is it that you don't think it is within your remit to make an overture to the Ministry of Education, which currently controls some 400,000 students who happen to be a captured audience? So as a potential solution to solve this problem in the long term, is your unit able to produce a module, first off? And have you had any discussions with the Ministry of Education for including it in their curriculum?
Thank you. There is no reason why we cannot collaborate with the Ministry of Education. as a ministry treating in the social sector with this issue, and I would suggest that this is an issue that we can all, I am talking about all the agencies, all the ministries, discuss further following this session, and I'm sure Office of the Prime Minister may have had some interaction with the Ministry of Education, but I would let them speak to that. But I see no reason why we cannot look at it and address the issue of the school-age population and also child-friendly material in this area to introduce in the schools.
Madam Chair, we have had discussions with the Ministry of Education with specific reference to the Health and Family Life Education program that is being managed by the Ministry of Education, and it's with specific reference to domestic violence and child abuse. So those are the areas that we thought were critical for inclusion in that HLFE program being managed by the Ministry of Education at the schools.
Could we then put a target that maybe by September of 2018, that's maybe nine months from now, in the new academic year, schools in Trinidad and Tobago will have available to them the material, prepared, the child-friendly material, as PS Jacinta Bailey said, so that they can include it into their curriculum. And therefore, it's not as if we're talking about it, but we are putting something concrete, reasonable timeline, and therefore we can start sensitizing the school-age population on this particular difficult problem.
Senator, if I may, I don't know if these officials will be able to speak to that, because that really would reside with the Ministry of Education, and therefore, by even their best efforts, they would not be able to give a commitment to that, because they would not.
But Madam Chair, I'm talking about preparing the module. What is the Ministry of Education to do will do, but do you think a 9-month period would be enough time for you to prepare that particular module so you will have it available in case the Ministry of Education wishes to use it by the new academic year? Do you have the resources, the manpower, the available tools?
Madam Chair, I think we do, and it's a matter of engaging the Ministry of Education in a discussion and looking at what they currently have on that program.
And a lot will depend on what their interaction is and what time is available and when, so point taken. Senator Moses, you want to ask a question? Okay. Then, to a question that deals a little bit with the human resources, again, going back there, because that lies, that's the crux of the matter, if you have the resources to be able to offer these services. And in the submission coming from the TTPS, I note that between 2015 and 2017, there has been an increase in the number of victim and witness support officers and the number of victim and witness support officers. So going from 14 officers in 2015 to 17 in 2017, and 9 officers in 2015 to 13 in 2017. And my question is, because what was raised in the recommendations, just going back, dealt with the training for the officers and ensuring that they were fully trained to deal with victims, to receive victims of domestic violence. And my question is, what are the measures that are put in place to monitor the effectiveness of the interventions that are made? And has the increase from 2015 to 2017 resulted in an increase in the effectiveness of the victim and witness support unit with respect to treating with victims of domestic violence? And are there any intentions to increase the number of officers or the number of officers in 2018?
In terms of the monitoring the effectiveness of the Victim and Witness Support Unit, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has in fact recently hired persons to do monitoring and evaluation, all in an effort to assist us in adequately monitoring some of those particular responsibilities. So we are still in the formative stages in terms of dealing with that process. In terms of the hiring additional victim and witness support officers, we have we have space for approval for 3 other officers, and subject to budget constraints in this fiscal, we would be looking forward to at least hiring those 3 officers. In terms of when we get the additional resources, we could look at looking at having 1 or 2 additional locations. Generally, when we look at the number of officers, in some discussion, we realize that we may have to make an application to certainly increase the number of officers because given our divisional responsibilities, we have the view that as much as 4 officers per division would adequately fulfill the responsibilities, but we have to go with our financial requirements at this point in time.
Staying on that point, I see you speak of a victim and support unit, and we receive documentation from the TTPS telling us about a community policing unit. And we see sections like Port of Spain Division. Well, let's go to Central Division, where we have at present a complement of 22 officers. Can you distinguish between community policing and victim support unit? And are victim support officers working on a 24-hour basis, as well as the community policing officers? How do they work?
The community police officers are either members of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service or members of the Special Reserves. The victim and witness support persons are civilian persons who have been employed with the police, who have special qualifications in the field of social science, social work. They actually, while they are rostered for 8 hours, they are actually on call, so that if they need to come out during any 24 to give some assistance, they could. But the victim and witness support officers are civilian staff who have been employed to deal with the victim and witness, to staff the victim and witness support unit.
Well, certainly I'm looking at the listing here, and we see, for instance, in Central Division, you have 22 officers working in the community policing unit for Central Division. How do they work? Do they work 8 to 4? Do they work around the clock 24 hours that they'll be always available? How do they work?
Well, the divisional commander within each division has the responsibility for rostering officers attached to that division, and as their particular responsibilities come up, I am saying that they are in fact available over the 24, but the divisional commander has that responsibility to detail them.
Senator Murray, or you want to
A follow-up, but on a slightly different angle. And this is really to the police, because MP Jennings-Smith spoke about the availability 24/7 of the victim support officers. I want to ask a slightly different question, and this is referring to something that has gone horribly wrong. The court has granted a restraining order to against a perpetrator. This restraining order has been violated in the past with loss of life. What I'd like to know from the police and from the victim support unit is this. When the court grants a restraining order, are you informed and do you keep a track of it? And when a victim complains that someone may be in breach of that order, how promptly do you respond at the level of the police and at the victim support unit? Do you have a sort of a sponsor officer who would look at this case and take the violation of the restraining order seriously to provide some kind of 24/7 support for this particular victim. So the question to the police is, are you informed by the court? Do you keep a record of these restraining orders, and how promptly do you respond when a victim says she fears that this may be violated? And the second, to the victim support unit, are you available so that in the case of any breach of this order, you are able to provide some kind of counseling assistance while you wait for the police to attend to this matter?
Whenever an order has been granted, whether interim or a full order, the police within the district, a copy of that order is in fact served on the police. And for a matter of fact, we are required to serve the order on the respondent. So we also keep a copy in our records at the police station. So we are in fact aware about orders that have in fact been granted. Whenever there is a breach of that order, based on the fact that the applicant or the victim would have come to us, the police would in fact investigate that matter, and where there is evidence, we would prosecute. We would prosecute the respondent or the particular perpetrator for breach of that order, and we would have the victim and witness support officers would be aware of that particular matter, and they would also deal with the victim. They would support the victim as is necessary.
Commissioner, there were cases, we have seen it in the media, where one of these restraining orders was violated. I understand, and I think recall a case in Tobago where a woman was actually murdered by someone who was under this particular order. Something would have gone wrong in that situation. What, from your experience in policing, would have gone wrong? Because you have the order, the reports were that this particular victim made the reports to the police. Is it that you didn't respond in time, or you didn't think it was important, or is it that there are some other factors beyond your control which would allow this breach of order to occur and the loss of life to result? The question is, what could have gone wrong?
While I am not particularly aware, I don't have the facts of that specific thing, I would not be able to comment. However, if in fact a report was made and the police failed to respond, the police would have certainly not acted appropriately, and certainly we would have had to investigate that matter to see where we would have breached, where which officer would have in fact been at fault with respect to not taking the appropriate action.
Had cause within the service to undertake this type of internal investigation, or it's not really something which occurs normally within the service? Have you had cause to investigate this?
We have in fact been treating domestic violence reports very seriously, to the extent that reports of domestic violence or breach of the orders, the inspector at the station or the sergeant at the station, they're the only ones who have been assigned to deal with these matters. And wherever incidents may have occurred, certainly the professional standards unit would be engaging and investigating those matters.
So I have a follow-up for you. When we have domestic protection order, what system you have in place to share that information throughout your organization? Because, for example, a breach may have been committed and it is reported, and you are maybe on the lookout for that particular perpetrator. What system you adopt to ensure that all officers throughout Trinidad and Tobago are aware of that breach, that person, the name and description?
Well, once the matter is investigated, if we have not been able to arrest the perpetrator, certainly we would obtain a warrant, and we have a database where warrants are in fact entered onto the database, and all police officers on the First Select system could check the database to determine if there's a warrant for anybody in Trinidad and Tobago.
Victim support services, I needed to get a response from them. With respect to a victim who has been granted a restraining order against an individual, do you have within your unit someone who can be contacted very quickly so that in the case of an individual who has genuine fear and concern that the order may be breached, they can communicate with that person, and that person can then act as a sort of sponsor for them to provide some assistance while you're waiting for the police to act?
Thank you very much. All the officers of the Victim and Witness Support Unit are required to work on call 24 hours. So we would get calls from victims once they feel that they are in need of support. They would contact us, and we would respond accordingly to offer that support to them, be it whether it's in the day or in the night. We respond accordingly. We may even make contact with the police station on their behalf if they haven't contacted as well. We may accompany them to the police station as the need may exist at that point.
Let me take Mrs. Gopal.
Thank you. The submission from the Office of the Prime Minister indicated that the locations of shelters cannot be released and must remain private and confidential. My question is there any case or reported cases where the perpetrator has found a victim at that shelter?
The only time that happens is if the client calls the victim, calls the perpetrator from the shelter. And I remember one shelter complaining that took place, and they had to evacuate the client from that shelter to protect the safety of the others.
Mr. Janisman?
I'm really concerned about information sharing and data, and I want to ask if the Victim and Support Unit of the TTPS, are you in possession of the information from the Central Registry from the Office of the Prime Minister?
Thank you. No, we are not.
Okay.
And that's actually one of the recommendations that we are going to make. And we understand that this is an incremental process, and we are now phasing in, because it just came to fruition in 2016. So one of the recommendations I expect that we will make is that as this is built out and as a coordinating agency comes into play, which is why that is so central, that type of information will be available to all of the agencies that deal with domestic violence. Are there any last questions from the members?
Thank you very much for indulging me, Madam Chair. But I do have a question for the police again. Last question I assure the committee, I assure you, Madam Chair, and that is, usually, of course, the victim has to make a report. She may contact a social worker, but she has to make a report. She may physically have to come to the police station. I'd like to know what has been done within recent times to ensure that police stations are designed or have a separate private room where you can handle this particular report with the sensitivity that it requires? And do you have female officers on call who will be able to come and attend to a victim of domestic violence and other types of violence, but who may be in need of that kind of treatment by the officers?
Yes, the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, we have in fact remodeled we no longer call them reception areas, we no longer call them charge rooms, we call them reception areas. We also have within each particular station, we have interview rooms where victims could be privately interviewed. Police officers, female police officers, are in fact available either at a particular police station or within the division. If a particular police station, for some reason, do not have a female officer at a particular point of time, for one reason or the other, they could in fact get assistance from another police station within the division or even outside of the division. So we have female police officers available during the 24 hours of the tour of duty.
All police stations now in Trinidad and Tobago do have these private interview rooms.
Yeah.
They are non-outstanding.
Well, let me say most of them, because we do have one or two that, that we still have to bring up to speed, but most of them, and within each division, we do have that facility within each
Assistant
division.
Commissioner now say that by September of 2018, 9 months from today, all of your stations will be up to speed with respect to these interview rooms.
Yeah, subject to budgetary constraints.
Very
Thanks.
Senator Hossain could not be with us today. However, he did send, he's a member of the committee, and he did send some questions. And so I'm going to ask the Vice Chairman to just ask the last questions, which would have come from Senator Hossain.
Yeah, and these questions are for the Office of the Prime Minister. Can you tell us, with respect to the new shelters that you're about to open, would they be on a 24/7 basis?
Yes, they're intended to be.
And how would you, the intake of victims, can they come at any time of the day or night and be accepted?
There's a process in place. We have a hotline, a domestic violence hotline. Persons who call that hotline, we would arrange for them to access the centers, the shelters. So it's a referral basis. You have to be referred to the center. What will be open, and we hope to run an extended schedule with that, would be the gender resource centers, where anyone can walk in from off the streets.
Now, I know there is a principal approach in place where they ask the victim to get a protection order in place before they are accepted. How do you deal with that? Are you going to accept them immediately after? Like, for example, if at 2 a.m. in the morning you get a call and they call the hotline, can they just come to your residence?
It's a 24 hours, 7 hours, 7 days a week operation.
Great, thank you very much. I know that the TTPS has a halfway house. Can you tell us if that house is in operation and how do you all operate to victims of domestic violence and abuse?
I need to get some more additional information to be able to answer that question.
Is the Victim and Support Unit in contact with that house? Do you utilize that house? What are the services that you gain from that house?
Thank you very much. Relative to the house that is located at Forwards Police Station, the Victim and Witness Support Unit has been in contact with that house. We are normally assisted with overnight care for victim and witnesses of domestic violence.
Okay, thank you.
So I'd like to invite now the Mrs. Bailey Sobers, Mrs. Johnson, and Mr. Phillips to make brief closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, I want to indicate how thankful we are as a ministry to have been part of this session. Certainly the information sharing is always useful, and some of the information that came out here certainly pointed towards the need for further collaboration with our stakeholder agencies on this particular area of domestic violence, and some of the sharing also would contribute to our planning as we move forward to fiscal 2018 operations and activities in the communities. So we also remain committed as a ministry to the implementation of the recommendations of the committee, and also to the future liaison with our stakeholders on some of the recommendations that came out of this actual session this morning. So again, thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Johnson.
Some of the issues we've raised here, are clearly identified in the gaps we discovered when we looked at the institutional arrangements in place to treat with domestic violence, and the shortfalls in the legislation of the Domestic Violence Act. One of the things that a lot of the discussion here hinges on is how we use that interministerial committee that has been proposed to look at the institutional strengthening of the agencies and the systems to deal with domestic violence, how that committee deals with the implementations of some of the recommendations which came from the general public of Trinidad and Tobago and the key agencies that are working in the area of domestic violence. It would be instructive to see what happens within a year, again, subject to the approval of the cabinet here, what happens. And hopefully, when we come back here to discuss this issue, we should be in a better position to say what is being delivered and how effective we are in terms of reducing domestic violence and achieving that gender equality that we talk about for 2030. The discussion here has been rich and rewarding, and we hope that we will have a lot of the things that we want to see in terms of domestic violence implemented within the shortest possible time frame. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Phillip.
Yes. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service would want to continue deepening their working relationship and networking with the other stakeholders. We would also want to ensure that in order to increase our efficiency and our effectiveness in particular, not only dealing with crime, but in particular dealing with domestic violence, the whole aspect of domestic violence and domestic violence prevention, that we would enhance our capability and of the officers to ensure that we increase their competence. Right, thank you.
Thank you so much. If I could just take a minute to summarize some of the things that we have discussed, some of our findings, and a couple of the recommendations that would have come out as we were making our discussions. The committee is pleased to recognize that based on the report of 2015 and the recommendations that were made, there has been some progress, I think, by every agency dealing with domestic violence to realize some of these recommendations. In the OPM, we realize that there is a move to fill the critical director positions that have been outstanding by year's end, and that's calendar 2017. And so we do recommend and support that this is done so that the entire unit can be filled out by first quarter of 2018, as is the plan. The 8 safe houses that are run by NGOs, the OPM tends to operationalize 4 further safe houses, 2 that are newly constructed and 2 3-bedroom units that are being refurbished at this point in time. And we expect that that will come on stream in this fiscal and run on a 24/7 basis where it's always open and available for victims. 75% of the domestic violence reporters, I should say, those who report, are female. And therefore, of the 4 new centers that have been identified and should be operationalized very soon within this fiscal, 3 will be available for females, 1 available for male, and these are also going to take into consideration the issue that was raised in the 2015 report where families with boys over 10 cannot be accommodated, and so this is going to be addressed with these 4 centers that are going to be operationalized. Also looking at the issue of the coordinating agency, which is one of the paramount suggestions from 2015, and that has been suggested and is before the cabinet, and we recognize that from the OPM. And we anticipate that once the approval is given, then the information will be shared with all of the other agencies who don't seem to have that information right now, but we anticipate that as 2018 rolls over and that institution is approved, that will spread to the other agencies, and we can see that coming to the fore in 2018, because I think we all recognize as one of the critical pillars of this discussion that information sharing, coordination, use of resources, networking, reduction of duplication, all of these things are critical to ensure that the domestic violence victims receive the kind of efficient service that we all want to provide to them through our different agencies. One of the other findings that we should mention is that the public awareness that was mentioned in the 2015 report, though there are still things going on, everybody has identified that they do workshops. There's a radio program being run by the Family Services Division. The community police are also involved, and in different police outreaches, there are the booths where domestic violence is discussed, and the attempt is made to increase public awareness. I think we can all agree, though, that there needs to be a more specific focus towards dealing with young people and their awareness, and men as well, which is two of the main recommendations of 2015. And so we want to, in our recommendations, suggest that young people do need to be exposed in a greater way. And one of the recommendations coming from the OPM was that there needs to be some data analysis done to identify the different audiences and develop specific programming to reach those audiences. And one of the suggestions came out from our discussions that the schools can be used, and that the agencies can actually develop modules which can be used, and in discussion with the Ministry of Education can be made accessible to the young people who really need to hear this message, so that as they get older, they would be able to have the awareness and to avoid some of the problems that face domestic violence sufferers in the future. So that is one of our recommendations as we go forward. Also, with respect to the central registry, we recognize that in 2015 it was mentioned, it was completed in 2016, which is progress, and it is being developed on a phased basis, let's say. So one of our recommendations would be that by 2018, this central registry, which has been able thus far to influence policy decisions, would be able to go further into influencing now programming decisions. And of course, we look forward to that central registry also being available to all agencies. And if in fact the coordinating agency does get off the ground, as we recommend it should in 2018, then that will be one of the main areas of data collection. And that would also speak to one of the recommendations made in 2015, which dealt with research and information gathering for the purposes of policy formation as well as programming effectiveness. We also recognize that the TTPS has begun to hire some M&E specialists to deal with looking at how effective the interventions are, and we do recommend that in 2018, all of the agencies look towards ensuring that we are not only doing, but we are looking at what we are doing and its effectiveness with respect to how we move forward with our programming, any tweaking of policies that is necessary to make our services more effective to those who we are trying to assist. So I think that basically is a capsule of what we discussed, our findings, our recommendations going forward. And I want to thank the officials who came out here, and I want to thank you also for taking on board the recommendations of 2015 and moving each of you positively in the direction of ensuring that what we do at the JSCs doesn't just end in the talking, but it goes forward into what the ministries and the agencies do in order to affect the quality of life of the citizens in Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to thank you. We have executives here, and I know that you will be working with your staff members to ensure that these changes were made, and you will be continuing that work so that maybe in 2 or 3 years, if another committee calls and looks at the reports of 2015 and 2017, they will see that steady progress. And most importantly, the victims and the people who we are trying to serve will also feel the effects of us making that effort to serve them better. So I want to thank you so much for your work in this regard. And at this time, I want to thank our viewers, our listeners, and I want to declare this meeting now adjourned.